All right, we move further from here. Now, outgoing U.S. President Joe Biden delivered a farewell address to the nation, his fifth and final address from the Oval Office, just days before President-elect Donald Trump takes over.
Right, and of course, as we know, that will happen on the 20th of January. And touting his accomplishments at home and abroad, Biden said in the past 4 years, he kept his commitment to be president for all Americans after the country went through a tough 4 years with the pandemic, inheriting an economic crisis.
It will take time to feel the full impact of all we've done together. But the seeds are planted, and they'll grow and they'll bloom for decades to come. At home, we've created nearly 17 million new jobs, more than any other single administration, a single term. More people have health care than ever before. And overseas, we've strengthened NATO. Ukraine is still free. And we've pulled ahead of our competition with China. And so much more. I'm so proud of how much we've accomplished together for the American people. And I wish the incoming administration success, because I want America to succeed. That's why I've upheld my duty to ensure a peaceful and orderly transition of power, to ensure we lead by the power of our example.
Joe Biden called for maintaining fair government, issuing a warning for the next 4 years. He said it was important to safeguard democratic institutions, holding the government accountable and keeping alive the American democracy.
But all of us on the night. That democracy must defend and be defined and be imposed, moved in every way possible. Our rights, our freedoms, our dreams. But we know the idea of America, our institution, our people, our values that uphold it are constantly being tested. Ongoing debates about power and the exercise of power. But whether we lead by the example of our power or the power of our example. Whether we show the courage to stand up to the abuse of power or we yield to it. After 50 years at the center of all of this, I know that believing in the idea of America means respecting the institutions that govern a free society. The presidency, the Congress, the courts, a free and independent press, institutions that are rooted.
President Joe Biden warned that an oligarchy is taking shape in America, saying a dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a few individuals threatens the United States democracy.
Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead.
As Republican Donald Trump prepares to return to the White House in a few days, Biden warned that Americans are succumbing to misinformation and that press freedoms are deteriorating.
President Biden
I'm equally concerned about the potential rise of a tech industrial complex that could pose real dangers for our country as well. Americans are being buried under an avalanche of misinformation and disinformation, enabling the abuse of power. The free press is crumbling. Editors are disappearing. Social media is giving up on fact-checking. The truth is smothered by lies told for power and for profit. We must hold the social platforms accountable to protect our children, our families, and our very democracy from the abuse of power.
President Biden also took credit for the ceasefire in Gaza, saying Israel-Hamas deal was developed and negotiated by his administration.
After 8 months of nonstop negotiation, by my administration, a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached by Israel and Hamas, the elements of which I laid out in great detail in May of this year. This plan was developed and negotiated by my team and will be largely implemented by the incoming administration. That's why I told my team to keep the incoming administration fully informed, because that's how it should be, working together as Americans.
All right, for more on this, our correspondent Susan Tehrani is joining us live from New York. Hi, Susan. First things first, your key takeaways from that speech.
Yeah, those were really important sound bites that we just heard you play. You know, with everything that Biden says, we can really talk about it and analyze it, but there's no doubt that this speech comes in the backdrop of the fact that, first of all, he doesn't want to leave Washington in office. He didn't want to step aside as a contender in the 2024 presidential election. And he recently said that had he been the candidate, he would have beat President-elect Donald Trump. So really, it comes at a time when most Americans know this. We know this. Our viewers around the world know this, that he was sort of put aside by his own party, if not by the majority of Americans who didn't vote for him. That being said, you know, there is no doubt that a lot of the things that he mentioned, while his supporters will say it was a warning, it was the right warning, it just was out of touch with what many Americans have experienced during the past 4 years and what they're seeing now and what they're looking for the future of the country. Usually farewell speeches, starting with with George Washington, the founding father of the United States, is a time for optimism, hope, looking forward, and perhaps, you know, some warnings. But to compare the tech industry here in the United States to the military-industrial complex and call it the tech-industrial complex, like President Eisenhower did, is a step too far. And I think that's where, you know, he lost many of the Americans who were watching, were hoping, you know, for a hopeful message of transfer of power, you know, talking about censorship, misinformation, not having guardrails on social media. Those are things that many Americans just don't want anymore. And they saw that and they pushed back on it because of the Biden administration. First of all, stifling free speech on social media platforms like Meta, as Mark Zuckerberg recently said, regarding his own son's laptop. The Hunter Biden laptop story was basically kept in the dark during the 2020 election. And then about COVID and other issues. So the censorship was one of the reasons why Biden or Kamala Harris actually lost, and the Democrats have lost the majority of the people. And for him to come and say, you know, be careful, there's going to be no guardrails on social media, it almost appears that he doesn't trust the American people to make their own judgments and their own decisions. And he's sort of alluding to that, which is, again, something that wasn't to the benefit of the Democrat Party. Nonetheless, again, just in a nutshell, it was very far off with what many Americans are feeling right now.
Susan, now another point that he mentioned, which I'm seeking clarity on, is he said an oligarchy is taking shape in America, a dangerous concentration of power. My question is, who is he really referring to here? That's
exactly what I had in mind as well. Oligarchy, that word that's really stood out and made headlines all over. Your take on that?
Yeah, that is the headline grabbing one. And it just depends who's reporting for it and about it. You know, those that are close to the Democratic Party here in the United States are really touting that as a very important warning. But again, you know, the majority of people and those that are not, you know, supporting the president or the Democrat Party are talking about, you know, what is he talking about? Does he want more censorship? Is that where the Democrat Party is leading? It's no doubt that he was talking about Elon Musk with his purchase of X. Then you do have Mark Zuckerberg recently. He has donated a large amount to the Trump library as well. And then the inauguration, and in the front row of the inauguration of President-elect Donald Trump, you're going to see Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, and Elon Musk sitting right next to each other, next to politicians. So I think that was sort of something that he was alluding to.
Yeah, it really ties into that tech industrial complex that you mentioned earlier.
So that we've heard now.
Yes. All right, Susan. Thanks so much for getting us the latest and, you know, really breaking it down on what it had and what it didn't. That was the farewell speech by Biden. Thank you so much, Susan. That was Susan Tehrani joining us from New York.
Thank you.